So the first topical is in the name of Deputy Pauline Tully to discuss the non-payment of carbon taxes and VAT on solid fuel.
Minister, I've been in discussion with fuel merchants in my own constituency and beyond who are being adversely affected by fuel smuggling from the north. The fuel merchants I've spoken to employ people, they pay PRSI, they pay their taxes, including their carbon tax, VAT, and they enforce the smokeless fuel laws. Yet they cannot compete with the selling of smoky fuel from the north, due mainly to the continual rising carbon taxes. The fuel merchants I've been speaking to broadly welcome the recent announcement by Minister Ryan to introduce a nationwide ban on smoky coal from next year and implement regulations designed to curb air pollution and its impact on public health. The proposed legislation will see smoke emission rates for manufactured solid fuel, coal and coal-based products reduced and the permitted sulphur content reduced also over time. However, in order for these laws to be effective and the widespread selling of fuels mislabelled as being low smoke has to be stopped. In addition to this, the 100,000 tonnes of coal which is coming in from the north every year cannot be permitted to continue. That 100,000 tonne of coal coming in represents a retail value of approximately 56 million per annum. The main reason this is happening is that solid fuel in the north has a VAT rate of 5% compared to the rest of Ireland at 13.5%. Also in the north, carbon tax is 0%, whereas in the south, currently carbon taxes on 1 tonne of coal are €87, and this is set to increase to €107 per tonne next year and €126 per tonne the year after, and so forth until 2030. So based on the current rate of carbon tax, the 56 million worth of smuggled coal per annum represents a loss in VAT of over 7.5 million and a loss in carbon tax of 8.7 million. So that is a total of over €16 million lost to the state. It also represents a loss of almost 40 million to the retailers. So based on carbon tax rates from 2021 to 2025, if this continues, the state will incur a further loss of €130 million, and to the retailers the loss will be €188 million. But the issue is there's little or no enforcement around the sale of fuel. There's no checking around mislabelling of goods, and any effort to curtail smuggling is not happening. The proposed nationwide ban on smoky coal is being introduced to improve our air quality, but without a dedicated task force to look at this issue and enforce proper labelling of goods and the sale of smokeless fuel only, our air quality will not improve and therefore the health of our people will continue to be impacted negatively. There needs to be more education for the consumer on the health and environmental impact of smoky coal, but there also needs to be fines for merchants caught trading in smoky coal and mislabelling products. So basically, Minister, what we have is a significant loss of revenue to the state in both VAT and carbon taxes. We have fuel retailers really struggling to try and run a legitimate business who pay their taxes, pay wages to employees, pay PRSI, and are just basically seeing their business going down the Swanee. It means that reaching our carbon targets becomes more difficult. It's contrary to the government objectives of a clean air strategy, and the Ricardo report, which estimates the cost of burning smoky coal at €722 million, continues. Minister, there needs to be proper monitoring and enforcement of the rules around the sale of solid fuel. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Deputy Tully for raising this matter in the House today. Solid fuel, which is coal and peat, is liable to excise duty in the state and in the form of the solid fuel carbon tax. Solid fuel carbon tax is a national excise and applies at different rates to 4 categories of solid fuel, including coal, peat, briquettes, milled peat and other peat. The solid fuel carbon tax rate is currently at €33.50 per tonne of carbon dioxide emitted. Liability for solid fuel carbon tax arises when solid fuel is first supplied in the state. As solid fuels are not covered by the EU control and movement regime, there are no barriers or controls on solid fuels moving between Member States and Northern Ireland. The movement of solid fuel across the border into the state from Northern Ireland does not generate a liability to solid fuel carbon tax, nor does the physical presence of solid fuel in the state. It is not until solid fuel is first supplied within the state that solid fuel carbon tax becomes liable. If a solid fuel supplier based in the state sources some or all of their solid fuel supplies from outside the state, they will become accountable for solid fuel carbon tax when they make first supplies in the state and must register with revenue to account for and pay solid fuel carbon tax. If a supplier based outside the state brings solid fuel into the state for supply direct to customers, they must register with revenue for the solid fuel carbon tax. I am advised by revenue that the majority of registered suppliers are importers or wholesalers and producers, and approximately 5% of those registered for solid fuel carbon tax are based in Northern Ireland. It is important to note that where a private individual travels to Northern Ireland to purchase their solid fuel for their personal use, no solid fuel carbon tax is payable, provided the private individual accompanies the fuel back into the state. With regard to VAT, under the terms of the protocol on Ireland, Northern Ireland transactions involving the movement of goods between Ireland and Northern Ireland in either direction continue to be treated as intra-community transactions and subject to EU VAT rules. These rules apply to business supplies of goods only to or from Northern Ireland to taxable persons in Ireland and other EU member states. The goods, including fuel products, are supplied at zero rate of VAT, and the taxable person in receipt of those goods self-accounts for VAT on a reverse charge basis and, if applicable, makes a simultaneous VAT deduction in their next VAT return. The onward distribution and sale of a fuel product to a consumer in the state is subject to the normal VAT rules, and the Irish supplier is liable to account for VAT, currently the reduced rate of 13.5% on supply. The consideration for a supply of goods or services is defined in EU VAT law and consists of everything which the supplier is entitled to receive in return for goods or services, including taxes, duties, levies, charges, excluding the VAT itself. Therefore, VAT is chargeable on the solid fuel carbon tax element of fuel products. Where a business in Northern Ireland sells goods and arranges the transport of those goods to a consumer in Ireland, such as sales of fuel products are referred to as intra-community distance sales. Intra-community distance sales of fuel products from Northern Ireland to a consumer in a member state are subject to VAT in the member state of destination of the supply, which would be Ireland if the customer is based in the state. In such cases, the supplier of those goods is required to register, subject to a threshold in the state, and account for VAT on those supplies.
Thank you, Minister. I'm not talking about, I suppose, somebody that gets into their car and drives across and buys a few bags of coal. Nobody's concerned about that. That sort of cross-border trade has happened over the years. But what we are talking about are advertisements, mainly on social media, where people can ring a number, pay online and get a large amount of fuel, tons perhaps of fuel, delivered to their door on a pallet. There's no carbon tax or VAT being paid on this. The prices that are being charged indicate that this could not be anyway, because it's way undercutting the price that the merchants here have to charge in order to pay their carbon taxes and their VAT. This has been going on for years and is only going to get worse as the price of fuel rises due to the increase in carbon taxes. And basically, something has to be done about it, because we're fooling ourselves if we think we're helping the environment by just ignoring this. And I'm just asking you, Minister, would it not be possible to give the Revenue Commissioners additional powers and greater resources to track and trace all solid fuel supplied on the Irish market? Because some of it is coming in and it is not what it's advertised to be, and it needs to be checked. I also suggest maybe a dedicated free phone for customers and retailers to report suspected carbon tax and VAT avoidance, because, again, fuel merchants very frequently do not know who they are supposed to report this issue to and are passed from pillar to post as to whose responsibility it is, and nothing is done about it. I mean, there has to be an increase of penalties associated with non-payment of the solid fuel carbon tax. And also, I suppose, customer incentives to switch from using carbon-intensive solid fuel to low-carbon, low-smoke solid fuel. And just to point out that it is the poorest people in society who are actually paying our carbon tax, because they're the people who cannot afford to bulk buy this and order it across the border. So they're the people that are going and buying their couple of bags of fuel and paying the carbon tax, and they're the people who can least afford to do so. Thank you.
Thanks. The points which the Deputy has made, I think, are very valid, and Revenue will be watching in proceedings here today, and I think that they will take up and take note of what you've said in terms of social media and other forms of advertising campaigns which are impacting fuel suppliers in Cavan and in Monaghan. in the part of the country that the Deputy represents and which are impacting on suppliers on this side of the border. So I think they're fair points. Revenue do carry out enforcement operations. They carry out cross-border multi-agency enforcement operations. They also carry them out in conjunction with local authorities. Those have been impacted by COVID. There have been less of them, but we're, as you know well, as we all know, thankfully, we're moving into a better space in that regard. And I think compliance checking will have to be ramped up in terms of reporting. You mentioned the free phone. As I understand it, there is a reporting service available to revenue in any regard, not specifically a dedicated one for the issue that you're raising, but for any issues in relation to tax evasion or tax avoidance or non-compliance. It's open to anybody. Any person anywhere can report an issue to revenue. And I know that you're encouraging people to do that. So all in all, I think the points that you've raised are legitimate and are valid. And this feedback from this discussion we're having here today will go to revenue, and they will continue to monitor and to seek to enforce compliance. Thank you.